Well, good afternoon, hello, and welcome everybody to Securing Europe, a Local Perspective. I must say that was the easiest applause I ever got. I only walked through the back and you guys started away. I haven't earned it yet, but thank you very much for that warm welcome. It's amazing to see you all here today. I would ask you to look around for a bit. We got a nice mix of students and people that have been students before, I shall say, maybe once before. No, it's good to see. It's good to see that we are with a diverse group today, especially since we're going to be discussing an important topic, a topic that affects all of us. So it's good to see you all here today. Now, my name is Hajje Goubi. A little bit about my background is that I am a former United Nations youth representative for the Netherlands, specifically on the topics of human rights and security. Next to that, I am the co-founder of an intergenerational network called 2100, but above all, I'm very delighted to be your moderator for today as we discuss this topic. Now, I don't say delighted just for any reason, it's specifically because of the fact that we know that this is an important topic to discuss, right? I mean, I don't think I need to tell you about all the shifts that we see geopolitically for Europe. I mean, we saw the outcomes of the American elections, there is a war on the continent that we're dealing with, there are climate risks, there are cyber threats. All of this has a big impact on how we deal with the topic of security on the continent, but more specifically also how we answer the question, what does that mean for us locally, right? As local communities, how are we affected by everything that's ongoing? And how can each and every one of us play a role in what is going on? I will also say, in light of recent events around the world, I mean, we all see what is happening in the world right now. We are dealing with an ongoing genocide in Gaza. There is the Russian invasion in Ukraine. We see that, you know, just 3.5 years ago, this region was terrorized by the floods that happened here. So we see the effects of the climate crisis. I can understand that for each and every one of us here, the topic of security brings perhaps a lot of frustration, a lot of emotions. So I will also say we do want today really to be a collective discussion with everyone here in the room. So during the panel later on, there will be space for you to ask questions. There will be space to share your insights, reflections, comments, anything you have. So I just wanted to make sure that you also know that there is the space for you to sort of like voice what you're feeling when we speak about a secure Europe. Now, with that being said, today is actually quite exciting, the first event that we have in a series of 3 events. And this entire series is enabled by the European Commission. I mean, I don't have to tell you, but with the new commissioners coming in very soon and sort of shaping what the path forward will look like for the next 5 years, it is increasingly important to sit together here and talk as a local community about what is important when it comes to the policies that will affect each and every one of us as part of a local community, but on a broader scheme as part of Europe in its totality collectively. So that is what we are going to do today here in the beautiful Maastricht, might I also say in a beautiful location right here. And also, for example, more specifically zooming in on the context of Zuid-Limburg. So I'm very excited. We have experts joining us today, experts on security, on local inclusion, on Europe. So a lot that will be shared. But before we dive into that discussion, I would like to have a short conversation with somebody that can tell us more about the intention behind this series, right? So the other editions will also be about the climate crisis, AI, you call it, and we will have it. So I would love to ask for a big round of applause, everyone, for the deputy head on behalf of the representation of the European Commission in the Netherlands. But we have a big round of applause for Cecilia Torfin. And this one is for you, Cecilia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Cecilia, maybe before we start, I mentioned that you are here also on behalf of the representation of the European Commission in the Netherlands. It's a mouthful, I can say. Can you maybe explain to us a little bit more what it is that you do specifically?
Sure. Yes, so we are based in The Hague. We are working from the beautiful House of Europe, situated, maybe some of you have been there, right in the center of The Hague. And we are then the representation of the European Commission here in the Netherlands. So we work very similar to that of what an embassy would do. We report a lot to the Commission leadership, including to the President and to the entire senior leadership of the Commission, what's happening in the Netherlands. But a very big part of our mandate is to drive dialogue. So we have a task to talk to youngsters, but also to talk to many different other groups in society about the Commission's positions, the Commission's proposals. and also to listen, to be part of that dialogue and invite a two-way conversation. And that's why we're here today.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, you're describing indeed what we're going to do today. So would you say that that is also the intention behind Local Europe, so the series that we're going to have right now? What do you sort of hope to achieve with that?
Yeah, we are, of course, in a transition year in Europe. We had the European elections back in June. We have new political leadership at that level, and we have had a strategic agenda proposed by the member states, and a new mandate for Mrs. von der Leyen to become the next president of the European Commission. And in July, she presented political guidelines, a 30-page document packed with proposals of what we could do together. You touched upon this in your introduction, that we are facing a lot of systemic shifts. Yeah. We are facing a lot of challenges, and the role of the Commission in the institutional setup of Europe is, of course, to come with proposals. What do we do about that? Yeah. I think if we look at that package, I hope all of you read it, right? Some are reading the hangmat.
Exactly.
And they're following on also the mission letter for each and every of the commissioners that are being interviewed in the European Parliament, the last group of them today. Yeah. What are we suggesting that we should do from the side of the Commission? Hopefully they start working as a team on the 1st of December. And that's obviously just the beginning, because all of these policies and initiatives will only work if they're really understood, if we also cooperate in the design phase with good bottom-up dialogue. What does it mean? Yeah. And not least on this topic of security, preparedness and defense, which is pretty new for the European Union, right, to work on. For the first time, we have a Commissioner for Defense. Yeah. We're also going to have, in the first 100 days of the Commission, so presumably if they start 1st of December, by the end of February, there will be several new proposals, including a white paper on defense cooperation and on preparedness. Yeah. So it's very important for us to start talking about that. Yeah. And this series is an initiative from our side, from the representation, to do so. Yeah, to gather input also. Yeah, and we have 3 events planned. We hope to do more. The next one is going to be on artificial intelligence, and then we're going to have one on the clean industrial deal, and on clean growth. Yeah. And then we hope to be able to continue that, and also to do that outside of the big cities. We don't want to do that only in The Hague or in Amsterdam. We really want to go to other parts of the Netherlands as well. Yeah, so you sort of make a tour through the country in a way. Hey, that is a little bit on sort of what the journey ahead is for the Commission, everything that is to come. This is also the very first event that we have in this series. Before we dive into it in a little bit, what would you say is needed, or what do you hope to see that would make you say, oh, that series was really a success? I hope that people will actually understand, the intentions of the Commission, that we have a platform to explain that we have a first chance to enter into that dialogue, so that we also feel a bit how this is landing, what can we take with us. But that it is a starting point, and that it doesn't end there, because there will be, obviously, during the next 5 years and beyond, there will be lots happening to translate this into concrete initiatives. Yeah. So I hope you all leave the room today with a clear understanding of why we put these issues on the table and what the Commission is suggesting that we're heading. And if we can't have all the interaction today, I hope that we will have opportunity to meet again and to hear back from you what you thought about it. Okay, amazing. So an open invitation right there. Thank you so much. Can we have a big round of applause, everyone, for Cecilia Tilton? Thank you so much. Thanks, Cecilia. Okay, I could not do a better introduction myself, so I would say without further ado, let's hop right into the topic for today. And to do that, I'm very pleased to invite to the stage a stellar lineup of speakers, I can say, who have a lot of expertise on the local efforts here, but also on what it means when we look at European security. So can we get a big round of applause, everyone, for, first of all, senior expert on defense policy and strategy for the European External Action Service, Jean-Pierre van Ouwel. Then also a big round of applause for a foresight practitioner and co-founder of Pantopicon, working with local communities to anticipate future challenges. Big round of applause for Nicole Rijkens-Klomp. And last but not least, we are also delighted to be joined by assistant professor in international relations at Maastricht University. Can we have a big round of applause for Yves Rekkers? Good to have you. Welcome.
Very good to have you. Thank you so much for being here today. I wanted to start sort of by going by each one of you just briefly, because we're talking about a big topic, right? I already said there's a lot happening when we look at the sort of global security environment. And I wanted to hear from each one of you, how do you sort of see that global security environment that we're dealing with right now affecting the very specific context of local regions like Limburg? If we would zoom in on that, what would you say are the biggest immediate challenges that we are feeling here in the region with everything that is going on? Jean-Pierre, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Many thanks for having me here. Really great to be here in this beautiful setting in the beautiful town of Maastricht, or as the locals say, chic man. I was standing actually behind the curtains, and you know, when we work in the European Union and we discuss with member states, and security and defense is a very sensitive topic, huh? And whenever we do that, we always ask member states what they feel. And then they come in one by one, and we call that confessionals.
Oh, wow.
Got a different meaning now I'm here. To answer your question, not an easy one actually, because EU security and defense policy is very broad. And it also deals mainly, as I said, with member states. So we're talking on a national level. But the security and defense policy of the Union has really evolved over the years. And if we go back to that beautiful Treaty of Maastricht more than 20 years ago, at that time, security and defense was something very, very far away. It was about crisis beyond the European Union. It was about Africa, it was about the Western Balkans, it was not on our soil. That has changed now in the past 20 years. Yeah. I'll come to Ukraine in a second. But what we've seen over the years is that the concept of defense has been widening. And we are facing today threats that we call hybrid threats, cyber attacks. We see disinformation. We see this every day. And this is something that doesn't only affect people at national level, it doesn't only affect governments, it's affecting you. You are dealing with the consequences of cyber attack. You are dealing with the consequences of disinformation. And we see this, unfortunately, every day, and we only see this growing. What we also see is that events that happen very far away do have a direct impact on our everyday living. Take, for example, what happened in the Red Sea. Previously with pirates, now with Houthis who are attacking our commercial ships. We see that this affects us. Because if ships are attacked in the Red Sea, then it will be much more difficult for our commercial shipping to go there. And by the way, that's the only way to go there, unless you want to go through South Africa, but that takes you 2 weeks more, which basically means that the prices of your products will go tremendously up. So economic security is also something that is very important today. But what we obviously have seen since March 2022 is that also war is back on our territory. And we see that with Russian aggression against Ukraine. And by the way, this is something that doesn't only affect Ukraine, it affects us. Because we are supporting, and as European Union, as member states, the Netherlands, but also 26 other member states, are supporting Ukraine in their endeavor, not just to support Ukraine, but it is because Ukraine is fighting for our security. Right. If that wouldn't happen, we would have the Russians on our border. And I think that is something that you need to realize. Last point, otherwise I'm going to be too long. What's very important here is not only to see what the Brussels levels means for regions, but what region can mean for the Brussels level. And defense policy in the European Union is about cooperation. Defense is something that nobody can do on their own. And I can see that here that also applies to France and Germany. Nobody of the 27 member states can do this alone. So you need to cooperate. And the Netherlands is very good in that. The Netherlands has very close cooperation in the defense area with Germany, with Belgium. We have an integrated navy together with the Belgians. Thank God the Cook School is in Belgium and not in the Netherlands. Or it should have been here in Limburg. But we have that. And this region has a particular advantage there because this region knows very well how to cooperate with others.
I want to zoom in on that actually, if you allow me, Jean-Pierre, because just coming back to what you said, so it's very widespread, right? It's not the traditional sort of security where we speak about just conflicts, you say it's widespread because we're talking about hybrid attacks, right? It's cybersecurity, it's, as I also said, climate risks that we're dealing with. It is also the fact that, you know, we're a globalized world, so we see everything that is going on everywhere, and we also feel solidarity with what is going on. We see how it has economic impacts, as you said, also with the situation in Ukraine that we see. But there are a couple of things you mentioned, right? I hear you pinpointing to sort of the national efforts of countries, the European efforts. There is even more multilaterally upward sort of efforts that we make all together. If I can go to you, Yves, I'll burden you with the task of maybe helping us sort of differentiate between the two. Because if we speak about sort of security policy actions that we have on a national level, on an EU level, we have the NATO level as well. Can you just help us differentiate who bears which responsibility where? Because specifically today, if we want to zoom in on sort of the European context, I think it's important that we sort of get that distinction right there.
Yeah, it's a very fair question. But I think it's a fairly straightforward division of labor. It's NATO that's responsible for collective defense, for our territorial defense deterrence.
Right.
And NATO that also sets the capability targets for the NATO alliance as a whole and for the individual member states of what we need to actually guarantee that territorial defense and deterrence. At the same time, I'm also very hesitant to... The mistake that we have all too often made is talking about the EU and NATO as if these are competitors. If we look even at the final speech of the previous Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, he even warned against the risk of potential duplication, which I think is not the way we should look at it, because the EU has its own unique tool set. It has its integrated market, it has its regulatory capacity, it has its diplomatic capacity, which Jean-Pierre obviously knows much more about. And I think the von der Leyen Commission very much realizes that, both the previous one and especially the incoming one, that we need a strong European Union and we need especially a strong European defense industrial basis to have a credible NATO. I think that's the logical division of labor there, that we need to see these two as going hand in hand. Adding to that the EU's wider crisis management toolbox, which can come in support of member states whenever we see disasters.
Yeah.
If I maybe can add one thing on your first question, that is on these challenges that we face, and I think one of these challenges we are addressing today, that is the challenge that we need to change our mindset.
What do you mean when you say that?
For much too long, we have treated defense and security, and especially defense, as an isolated policy domain, as if this stands on its own, and the result has been that this was the easy victim whenever governments had to cut budgets.
Yeah.
While the challenges that we face today, they are multidimensional. We need a strong defense to guarantee our security. We need to guarantee our security to preserve our welfare.
Yeah.
And that is a mind shift that is only slowly kicking in, gradually but slowly.
That is an interesting point, so sort of like our perspective on security in that sense. Nicole, if I can go to you, I know that you also do a lot on sort of like future foresight, right? So where are we headed to as a society? If we look at also, and I think that's interesting about Limburg is of course also a cross-border region, right? So we have, you know, a lot of different countries on each side. For those contexts specifically, so local communities or cross-border communities, what do you think is sort of needed there and important sort of to take into account there when it comes to preparedness for security threats? How do we sort of become resilient, so to say?
I think most important is that we become more shock-minded. There is one certainty, that the future is uncertain, and that we have to deal with shocks and the diversity of shocks.
And you say shock-minded?
So crisis-minded, disruption-minded, because that's what we're talking about. This is all about security issues in the end.
Yeah.
I mean, you look, for example, at reports from the World Economic Forum. Every year they publish about shocks that might impact us, and they are very diverse. It's not only about war threat, it's about ecological shocks like climatic disasters, or social shocks like social unrest, and so far and so on. And I think most important is that we try to prepare for these shocks. But what we often do, and that's what I also learned from crisis governance, is that we prepare for previous shocks. So when you look, for example, at Belgium, we had our terroristic attack at Zaventem some years ago.
Yeah.
And that's a previous shock we are still preparing for and learning from, and that's good. The same holds for a pandemic, such as COVID-19.
Yeah.
We're preparing for such a pandemic again, but we should also prepare for future shocks
Yeah.
we don't know much about, and I think that's the meaning of becoming more shock-minded and proof, and that also holds for this region, is that we think about that. And what I see in the field is that it needs some courage to do so, because I remember someone saying, in the Netherlands, it's like we're living in the Anton Pieck bubble, and we don't want to talk about shocks and disasters, and we just want to have fun in life. And I think that's step number one from a local perspective,
Yeah.
that we dare to think about shocks. And then the next step is that we learn about shocks, that we also have a kind of knowledge base on that.
Yeah.
For example, everybody is talking about, oh, the next crisis is a biodiversity crisis. It's even worse in comparison with our climatic crisis. But when I ask people here in the region, what does it mean for Limburg in case we have a biodiversity crisis, in case of our food system and supply, what does it mean? I think hardly no one can tell. So it's also about building knowledge about this, and the next step is strategizing.
Okay, but that's interesting because you say it's very hard for people to make that tangible, become concrete. If I may challenge you in that same effort, are there any, so to say, tools that we can use, things that you know of, that you're working with when it comes to sort of making people more prepared and resilient for shocks?
Yeah. Of course, yeah, you first look at the crisis governance field, what's there, and when you look at disasters, we know there are protocols, procedures, scripts, everything is in place. But when you talk about future shocks, then it's different. Then when you look around, maybe you find a book like Taleb, Black Swans, but that's it, it's very abstract. So we were missing instruments to deal with future shocks. So we created a shock box with 30 shocks in it.
Okay.
So an ecological one, and a social one, or an
Sounds
economic
like a
one.
box you put your hand on and you get like a shock.
No, it's
30.
like a box of Pandora.
Yeah.
I would say there's a lot of negative material in it. But what we tried to stimulate was that box, and we also tried it with safety regions here in Limburg, is that we explored some shock scenarios, and we asked ourselves, what does such a shock mean for Limburg? What kind of systems are sensitive for this shock? And then we learned, okay, what are the weaknesses in our strategies? And I must say those weaknesses are very interesting. It's not that we are prepared for future shocks here in Limburg. So a lot of is missing, and so we have to put energy in that to work on these kind of strategies.
Interesting.
More focused on adaptation and resilience.
So the idea behind it then is that you have this shock box, so to say, if you will, and that it sort of helps to make it tangible for people. What sort of shocks could we be dealing with? Have you ever thought about it? What are weaknesses, strengths, opportunities? How do we sort of deal with it when it arises? And that's a way that you spark a conversation in that way.
Yeah, on several levels, also internationally. But now we're talking about the local perspective. And then you see, oh, it's very interesting to think about different types of shocks and then ask yourself, are we prepared? But the idea of the shock box is not that you just tick box 30 shocks.
Of course,
because I can imagine 100 others, and I think altogether maybe 1,000. So the idea is that you think about, what is my system? Where is Limburg sensitive for? What kind of disasters?
Jean-Pierre, if I can go to you. I mean, when we talk about sort of security, preparedness and resilience, what is it that we can sort of realistically expect from everyday citizens, so to say? What can we expect from them realistically to do to become more prepared?
Yeah. No, first of all, to say, I think indeed the solution of all this is in the combination of what the three of us are saying. And former Finnish President Niinistö has just produced a beautiful report about this, and he argues that what we need is a real whole-of-society approach. So we need to bring this Brussels level and national level and regional level and local level up to the citizen all together. And everybody has their responsibility in this, I think. When it comes to ordinary citizens, I think there's a whole lot that citizens can do. Does anybody of you know the website denkvooruit.nl for the Dutch-speaking here? That's the answer I expected.
Me neither, no.
Just look it up. It's there. And it gives you 3 scenarios. One on a big energy blackout, one on a big war, and what kind of emergency package you should actually have, and one on a natural disaster. This is done by the Dutch government, but as you see, the answer is stunning. And I think that there is a whole lot that we can do. And again, it's about connecting these dots. And it explains very easily what you can do as citizens. So it means that you have an emergency package at home where you have batteries, where you have sufficient water, where you have sufficient dry food, something that can sustain for a long time. All these elements, blankets, that stuff, very basic. So that's one thing, I think. And that demands a mindset. And by the way, I wouldn't get rid of that Anton Pieck feeling, because I really believe that also in these very dark times, we still need to have fun. But it is not either or, it's both and.
Yeah.
We need to do this together.
Yeah.
Secondly, I do think that, again, connecting the dots of all those levels, we can also, and local and regional authorities can help citizens prepare for these things. Look at what they do, for example, in Finland. I'm not saying that we need a conscription army again in the Netherlands. I think we're past that. But there are other ways of doing this. And you can have civil training. You can get people acquainted with these type of scenarios so that everybody knows what to do in such a case. Also, very easily, this is also about first aid. Does everybody in this room knows how to do first aid?
Oh, those are a lot more hands.
There's a lot more than the website, but still it's not half of the room, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and these are very basic things, I think, where, again, citizens have a responsibility, because I also see this as a civil duty.
Right.
But at the other hand, where I do think that, again,
local
authorities, regional, national, and also EU can bring this together. And by the way, this is also one of the main points of the new Commission, working on this preparedness and see how from a Brussels level we can help member states and we can help citizens in getting better prepared for that.
Yeah,
and at the same time,
yeah,
give people still the feeling that they can go to bed safely tonight.
And they are concrete examples, so thank you for that. Yves, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I very much agree with this, but at the same time, we can develop as many reports. Governments can develop as many reports as they want and as many websites as they want, but we can't expect anything from citizens if we don't communicate about it effectively.
Absolutely.
And I think we should expect much more from our European, national, local governments in communicating about the fact that security is necessary for our welfare, and that simply our welfare and our security comes at a price.
Is it the lack of communication, or do you feel like the communication is not effective enough right now?
I think for a very long time it was an ignorance. For now there is communication, but the communication, you have it from the military officials, who we also will hear later today, which then comes with some sort of feeling of anxiety. Yeah. I think we just can expect more in terms of government communication, that security comes at a price, and that it is not either military spending or social spending, or that it is an either-or issue. It comes together.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, hey, when we speak about communication, sort of bringing people along with what is going on, making them a part of the conversation, we actually did that on a micro scale here in the region. Because as you might know, just to make things a little bit more concrete, there have been some political sounds, for example, from the VVD in Parliament, where they were eagerly pointing to Limburg as a region to sort of allocate military weapon production. So producing weapons here in the province. And we actually asked residents of Maastricht what their thoughts are on the possibility of weapon manufacturing here in the region, being developed in Limburg, whether they knew of it, what they thought of it. So we have a short video to showcase what they said. Let's take a look.
Hey, goeiedag allemaal en welkom in Maastricht of Maasje. Mijn naam is Sebastiaan en ik sta hier vandaag namens Lokaal Europa op het iconische Vrijthof om lokale perspectieven op te halen over nationale en Europese vraagstukken. Daarom ben ik vandaag in Maastricht om aan de mensen op straat te vragen: weten ze dat ze mogelijk een wapenfabriek in de achtertuin krijgen en wat vinden ze daar eigenlijk van? Wat zou je ervan vinden? Meer ruimte voor defensie, misschien een wapenfabriek in de provincie?
Ja, het is eigenlijk van twee kanten uit. Het geeft wat rust en onrust. We zitten nu natuurlijk ook met de andere oorlogen te kijken tegenwoordig. Aan de ene kant, het gaat natuurlijk ook werk opleveren voor de ene mens. De andere kant gaat het onrust geven voor de mensen die hier in de buurt wonen, want ze weten natuurlijk nog niet wat het gaat geven erin. Ik vind dat het enigszins wel een beetje nodig is, want als wij dan bijvoorbeeld vanuit een andere wapenfabriek of opslag iets moeten ophalen, dan is het waarschijnlijk wat verder weg dan hier in Limburg.
Ik zou het heel beangstigend vinden als het zo dichtbij komt.
Ja, geldt voor mij ook. Ik ben sowieso tegen de wapenindustrie. En ja, als vrede is, dan moet het allemaal weg. En dan is er oorlog en dan doen we net alsof we niet meer afhankelijk kunnen en willen zijn van het buitenland. En dat kunnen we volgens mij toch niet, want alle grondstoffen komen uit het buitenland.
I mean, it's okay if it's a beneficiary for the economy. New job offers will appear in the Limburg. So yeah, maybe that's a beneficiary for people who do not work or looking for a job. The weaponry is not banned anyhow, so production of it is not banned. I don't think that's morally wrong, so if someone can produce it, why not?
Dat vind ik goed. Ik denk dat het goed is voor de werkgelegenheid. Het is dat die mensen natuurlijk ook bezig blijven. Ja, want anders loopt het misschien in Limburg ook wel helemaal leeg.
En ik weet wel dat de werkgelegenheid natuurlijk een punt is. Maar volgens mij hebben we er op dit moment niet over te klagen. Dus ik vind dat ook niet zo'n heel erg sterk argument om dan maar te zeggen van ja, maar dan hebben we werkgelegenheid. Ja, we hebben op dit moment weet ik hoeveel duizenden vacatures overal. Dus is dan werkgelegenheid een argument om die fabriek er neer te zetten? Ja, volgens mij niet.
We moeten met z'n allen zorgen dat we vrede hebben met elkaar. Tolerant zijn en ja, lief zijn voor elkaar.
Well, there we go. Also, Sebastian, who presented it, is here on the first row. Can we have a big round of applause, everyone, for Sebastian, for going out and gathering those voices. I would love to hear your reply to the video, but before we do, of course, we asked the people on the streets of Maastricht, but is there anybody in the room specifically about the topic of weapon production and industry that would like to share their impromptu Vox Pop edition? I know that Anna and Job are also here, but you are so awfully close to me that I might as well. Would you mind standing up and telling us who you are?
Jomas, I'm living here. I was born at the border, so I'm a borderliner.
Oh, nice. Borderliner, oh wow, that's a new one.
No, does everybody here know Evan? Close to the border, we have the Fabrique Nationale in Liège. So yes, it's already close to here.
Yeah.
Yes, it's welcoming. We need it, really. And I want to connect it to positive health. And everybody here, do you have your EHAC at you?
EHAC?
European Health Insurance Card. So I would connect health to defense, because the European Health Insurance Card is helping you and me when we have an accident somewhere in the EU, we get access when we show our card.
Yeah.
And it's connected to the health insurance companies.
Right.
So
but specifically, what is the relation then to defense? Or
health and defense is connected. It's another dot. So if we want to engage local citizens, and we connect our health, and being healthy and having access to health services in Europe, connected to the problem of war. We will get war in Europe, and so this defense industry has to come here. We need it. We have to produce it.
Yeah, it's sort of a more collective effort, is what you're saying, to work together. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to share something to the matter? You know what they say at weddings, speak now, forever hold your peace. There is somebody that will speak in the back. If you could tell us also shortly who you are.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Matthew Hubricks. I used to be president of the reserve officers in Brussels many years ago, before I retired. I have a question about this, production of weapons. Do you also consider new technology weapons? Most of the people still have Herstal, FN, just across the border, and that is a very good approach because it's a regional approach already. But do you also consider the production of drones, the software linked to it? And is it the university or the local authorities or the national authority that's keeping some eye on it?
So you're even making a more tailor-made point to the fact of what sort of weaponry will be produced. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you all so much, by the way, for sharing. We will get to questions later on, so please do keep them in the backs of your mind. If I can go to you, I mean, there's a whole myriad of opinions that we hear. I mean, we have somebody here speaking about what is the sort of latest sort of technological update on the weaponry. Are we up to date? People in the video speak about sort of the economic component. There are people that are afraid what it's going to do with, are we normalizing sort of the industry of war? What does it mean if we sort of normalize the creations of weapons, knowing that it will lead to also killing, of course, and warfare in that sense. So we have the whole lineup of sort of reasoning that people and feelings that people sort of have when we talk about weapon production. How do you respond to the video and hearing that? Yves, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Maybe first of all, it's a political decision whether or not a weapon factory should be located in Maastricht. As an
politically
academic,
correct answer.
It's not my role to make a statement about it, but I find the video excellent because it basically shows the two most typical arguments that we hear. On the one hand, the idealistic opposition against it. On the other hand, the more local, economic opportunistic support for it. But what we're missing is a bit larger picture. The argument that this is about security, this is about European security, and that requires investments. At the same time, I think the point made over there is also we should be aware that it's not the weapon factory in Maastricht or in Limburg that will put us at the forefront of a fight against Russia, for instance. Even by producing or helping in producing dual-use goods, we are already doing that. Maybe what some people in the audience might not be aware of, and not to reveal any secrets, but at less than 30 kilometers or 40 kilometers from here, in Brunsum at Joint Force Command, they are basically holding operational command already of the entire NATO operation at the eastern border.
There's
from the north
in
the Baltic Sea to the south in the Black Sea. They are basically there taking care of our deterrence of Russia. So it is already here in the region that we are at the forefront.
Can I ask you about that, though? Because indeed you mentioned the NATO base in Brunsum. Can you maybe speak to what does it do for a local region in sort of how they engage with defense organizations, sort of the realm of defense, if you will, if there is a base in Brunsum or if there is a weapons sort of factory in the backyard of somebody somewhere in Limburg?
I think until lately, this took place very much in not in disguise, but in the unknown. Most people were simply not aware of it. I think we could have expected much more strategic communication about why this is important. And the way they usually sell it is we have here 1,000 international staff employed in Brunsum. That comes with economic opportunities. That comes with an economic return. I'm not so sure that's the way of selling it. I think the way of selling it is showing that right here in Maastricht we are playing a role in actually doing something against the Russians. How it really relates to local governments, and it's a very tough question to answer, I must admit.
Nicole, maybe?
Yeah, maybe a regional reflection to that. I think this issue really deserves an integrated analysis in the sense that we just consider the economic impacts, because when we're talking about new jobs, what kind of jobs? Who's going to fill it in? What does it mean for our labor market? What does it mean in terms of logistics and the infrastructure needed for that? From a social point of view, I would say consider the safety of people also living around the production site. And in terms of ecological impacts, it is a production. So the question is, what is the environmental impact of this production? Not only on the short term, what does this imply on the long term, 5, 10, 20 years, when we invest in these kind of production
I like that. So you're saying very often we have a very clear-cut sort of assessment when we make a decision, but you're saying what is the societal sort of implication for it? What's the ecological one? Can we make a sort of broader assessment?
And from a regional perspective, I would say let's start a strategic debate on this, because that's what I'm missing. Because when people talk about war economy in our backyard, I hear so many different narratives in this region. I also hear about the airport in the north of our province being used, or we need exercise space for our military forces here in, that's something else. So I think you also have to scope and define very clearly what is this about, what does it imply. And then you can prepare an integrated analysis with a lot of expertise around the table and a societal debate.
Yeah, that's
needed, I guess.
You know what I'm also realizing as we're speaking, and I think that makes this point in particular very interesting, is earlier on we spoke about security risks, right? Like the flooding that we saw, but also cyber warfare that we see, the threats that we feel on the continent with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And in all those scenarios, we are, so to say, almost the one on who it is inflicted on. I think when we talk about the production of machinery, there comes this new element, right, where you are not just sort of the one that's inflicted on, but you are taking it's countering, you become a player in it as well, so to say. You become the one that can inflict upon others as well. How do you sort of look at that from that perspective, Jean-Pierre?
Well, to put it straight to Ukraine, I think we have two lessons learned there. First is that I think 2-3 months after Russia's aggression against Ukraine started, not only the Ukrainians, but also the Europeans were completely out of ammunition, out of weapons. And then later on came air defense, because there were more and more missiles from Russia coming to Ukraine. And later on, indeed, we see that the world has turned into a drone war. And all the time, we as Europeans are lagging behind. And again, coming back to the point that I made before, and I find that really important to emphasize, what the Ukrainians are doing today is fighting for our freedom, fighting for our security. And I think that is something that we really need to realize. So we need to continue to support them, and at the same time, of course, make sure that our own stocks are not emptied out. That was the reality. So yes, that means that you need to invest in defense industry, and the reality today is that European, I'm not speaking about Dutch, European defense industry cannot produce fast enough, cannot produce at a large scale, and cannot produce for longer term. These three very important elements, which means that we, by definition, rely on other countries. And other countries here is not European countries, this is outside European countries. This, for example, also China. Is that what we want in the world of today? I would say no. So we need to invest in that. Fully agree with what Nicole said. There are obviously risks to producing weapons and ammunition and everything that we have. And to answer the question, in my view, we should, indeed, it's the same what Nicole said about crisis, and the military say the same. We're always preparing for the previous war, not for the next one. So in terms of technologies, we should also invest in that. And it can not only be industry, this needs to be together with universities, with knowledge institutions. So you need to combine research and innovation and technology. I think that is very important. And again, this region has very good qualities there, I think. So you all need to do that. But coming back to Yves' point, I think that is, for me, the bottom line. And I really like the movie and also what the lady in the end said. But because, of course, who can be against that we all want peace? That is what it's all about. And unfortunately, that's not the world of today. We're not living in the 1990s anymore, but we live in the 2020s. And we see crises and wars all over, unfortunately. And it means, indeed, that we need to invest in that. And that also means that there are sometimes some downsides. But it is, as Yves said, if we want good education, if we want good healthcare, if we want a good social policy, that is all only possible if you can guarantee your security. No healthcare, no education, no whatsoever without security. So we need to invest in that. And I think, therefore, not only because we focus now a lot on weapon production, that is one element. I think another element, and that goes also for this province, and you mentioned NATO, I think in a wider sense, if we see that the defense organization is doing regular exercises, yes, that's also the consequence. Not always funny, does also lead sometimes to problems, but it's absolutely necessary if we want to continue to live in this beautiful Anton Pieck world.
Yeah. Anton Pieck is back at it again, I hear. I am curious in the meantime, are there any questions in the room for our panel? I see one over there. Thank you. You have a question? Please go ahead.
Yeah, of course.
If you could shortly tell us who you are.
Thank you so much. Hi. First of all, I'm a student at the Research Master in European Studies here at Maastricht University. Thank you so much for having us. A question I have, which is also, I think, a remark. We've seen in the video that most of the people interviewed were mostly worried about the local implications of such decisions. And I mean, this is the Local Europa meeting. we have asked previously what the regional level could do for the EU and what the EU could do for the regional level, but how do we make the EU relevant for locals? We are all academics or aspiring academics. We see this relevance because we focus on it. How do we bring back the EU to day-to-day locals' lives?
That's a very concrete one. Is there somebody that can...
Who has the answer to
Ooh,
that?
Jean-Pierre, it looks like you're bursting with an answer.
No. I think this is a very difficult one. And by the way, this is not only on defense policy. I think, let's be honest here, the EU is, as an organization is often struggling with that. How do we connect this ivory tower in Brussels with actually ordinary citizens? And this is very important. Well, I mentioned on preparedness a few things, and I think that the EU as such as organization can, first, it brings member states together. Second, it brings regions together. And as I said in the beginning, what I think is very, very important, that all these threats that we're facing, they don't know any borders. Hybrid threats, cyber attacks, disinformation, even war, they don't know any borders. You can close your borders here in Eisden or the German our adversaries don't care about that. So we need that cooperation. And I think the experience that people have in this region, like in many regions, by the way, I think this is the oldest Euro region that we have. So that experience should also be brought to Brussels. And I think Brussels can learn a whole lot from that. How we cooperate with Germans, with Belgians who speak 2 different languages, by the way. So 3.
I was going to say there's one more even.
You're right, 3. Very sorry. Living already for 9 years in Belgium. But I think that is very important, that we connect that better. Okay. And for citizens, I think it's important to understand what the consequences are of all these threats and how the EU can help protect citizens. I think that is the important thing.
But I find it interesting what you say. It's almost like you mentioned earlier the point of communication, right, Yves? But you say indeed there are so many issues that don't stop at the border. I mean, CO2 emissions, or for any that matter, they don't stop at a very nice, respective border. So it's also about communicating how sort of collective our fate is in that sense. Would any of you like to add anything? Or do you feel like...
I would say don't be too positive about cross-border cooperation. And when we look at crisis and how we work together in the past, cross-border, also one of the eldest regions. I also hear a lot about barriers, and because it's always under time pressure. I think that's an aspect. Under time pressure, it's very difficult to speed up in cross-border cooperation.
That is interesting, because we're trying to demarcate so that we can decide. So would you say that's something that we need to, that's part of that preparedness level that we have?
Yeah, and people are working on that. I'm working for the safety region, and I hear they are working cross-border with regard to new shocks. And yes, but I think there's still room for improvement. It's not that easy.
Yeah, maybe just one thing to add, because it made me think of the, Jean-Pierre started at the beginning of this conversation about the Niinisto report written by the former Finnish president, on which you also helped drafting it. And one of these sentences which caught my attention is, you cannot build preparedness by trying to isolate yourself from the outside world. And I think that is really the crux here, the fact that we are having this conversation, that we're doing this in a cross-border region, that is really essential. And I think we need to emphasize that much more. And maybe if I can add one thing on that. If we look at, for instance, also the role of us as university, we have a vital role to play here, to make that, to communicate about that, to teach our students about how to understand our neighbors and to learn them to understand our neighbors. And I fear that, by the way, that the announced cuts on higher education do exactly the opposite. But that being
that's indeed a whole other debate, and a good point. I would love to take a couple of other questions. There's a hand in the back. We have one here. Maybe. Maybe let's take this one. You were earlier. Sorry.
Hello, my name is Elise Eilert. I'm from NATO Joint Force Command Brunsum. So maybe I can have a bit of a comment there, rather. So I'll try to make it a question, but I'm really happy to hear this conversation. Honestly, it's one of the most interesting ones I've heard recently. And also, your conclusions about what Brunsum does and the visibility and how it connects to the local community. I think that there is probably one worthy work that's being done, which is in the sort of together with all the veterans and associations keeping the memory alive, right, of the World War II and all that. And I suppose that is actually important for that. But yes, I'll bring back the message that there's more we can do. I just remember I was, of course, here, so I'm a guest in Maastricht, right? Living here, so a very happy guest, but still, so I can just like comment, but recommendations.
Go ahead.
So I was here on the 24th of February 2022 when the full-scale invasion began, and the following day I was walking through Vrijthof. I had to go to groceries or something. And guess what? The carnival started. And it was such a surreal feeling, because like me, the war affected really heavily. I've been to Ukraine previously about that.
Okay.
But the people are around and enjoying and having fun. It seems like, no, nothing's happening, right?
It's like a dual reality.
It's a dual reality.
Okay.
And they always say, of course, the closer you are to the threat, or, you know. Yeah. But so I wasn't sure if the understanding that this is happening in Europe, if it's really there, right? And connecting this to those production of whatever, as our former commander, General Vollmer, used to say, we are past the time when we had wars of choice, like Afghanistan. We withdrew. We are now at an era where we will have to fight the wars of necessity. So what you say, I am not even sure if we are behind conscription or that. That all might come, because they were introducing that. And once, if we ruin the principle of, Ukraine is not entitled to sovereignty, then where are those borders that are entitled? You know, there might not be. I'm not sure if there's a
and
question. But
your
like
question
this
specifically then is because you're pinpointing to the fact that we have almost this dual reality, that we don't truly feel what's going on in terms of conflict in the world, but then also maybe does somebody want to comment on the quote about a war of necessity? Because I think that's something you quote, but I'm not sure if that's something that you agree with, or how do you look at that specifically?
Yeah, we definitely agree with that. I think, as I said, what's happening in Ukraine, we have no choice but to support Ukraine. If we don't do that,
then the rest
then
of Europe.
it's on our border. And by the way, it is sometimes on our border. I mean, not immediately the Dutch border, but certainly the Polish and the Baltic States border.
Yeah.
And by the way, the elephant in this beautiful church hasn't been mentioned yet. Let's see what's happening now after January when we get a new person in the White House.
Yeah.
I think it might become even more important that we as
point.
Europeans take up our responsibility and take care of our own security.
Yeah.
Where as much as I hope that we can still rely on the United States as well, and we will need to.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, absolutely. It's the collective fate that we, so to say, have with what happens there. There was also a question in the back that I'd like to take, and I will encourage each and every one of you to end your sentence with a question mark so that we can get more questions as possible. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I study at SB Economics, and my question is more related to NATO and recent events. If we look at United States, you just talked about it with Donald Trump being re-elected, but also broader trends in Europe. We have we have threatening results when it comes to right-wing shifts in our parliament that we see all over Europe, and more isolationist views there. And then the question is, for me, how can we ensure that we work together in all of Europe for our common defense and our common welfare if all of the different countries are moving more and more towards isolation?
Interesting. Yves, is that something you could speak to? No pressure at all.
It's the $1,000,000 question.
Yeah.
If I would have an answer to it, I probably wouldn't be sitting here.
No, you would have $1 million. There you go. That's sort of the gimmick, right?
Yeah, I think what we should try to avoid is trying to create a common threat perception, because that won't happen.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you would travel around Europe at the borders in the Baltics, they would have a different threat perception than they have in southern Italy.
Yeah.
I think that would be the wrong approach. What the right approach is trying to show that no country can deal with these issues on its own.
Yeah.
And if we further fragment the European Union, that no one will be better off than perhaps the autocrats that we have to deal with. And this is a challenge that, it's really the $1 million or the $100 million question, especially with what's the looming new presidency in the White House, who has often been more more critical of his own allies than of many of the autocrats that we're dealing with. And I think this is really the message that we should try to convey.
Good point. At a time where it's so important that we come together as countries, we are also dealing with these pressures to, you know, drive us more into our own interest, national-focused, so to say, attitude. You see that I'm like on a quest to get as many questions from the audience as possible, so I'm actually checking. There is a hand up there. Your hand was up quite some time. Also looking at this side, are there hands up here in a little bit? Okay, we have one over there. If Job is here.
Yes, hello. I am following up on the question that was just made, and without adding the promises of President Trump to end the war in 24 hours, I was actually wondering what are the strategies of divided Europe to help and support specifically in Ukraine, given that all the help has been sent until now on trenches, back and forth, outdated vehicles, not much economic support. The majority of the support was from the US, with veto on using long-range missiles. So it's kind of not actually involved in the defense. So what is the strategy and what do we plan or would be a good action to defend ourselves or just show not only to Russia but also other countries and powers in the world that Europe is something that has to be played, it's a reality.
Yeah, I can take that one. First, not entirely, or actually not at all, agreeing with what you said about what the EU is doing versus US. Actually, the EU is providing much more money and support to Ukraine than the United States at this stage. On the other hand, if the US would drop out, we would have a serious problem. There's still a whole amount that the United States is taking care of. But in terms of overall economic support, the European Union is providing a lot. And for the first time, I think the European Union is also providing a lot of military equipment. We've never done that before. We have a new tool for that. It's called European Peace Facility. I guess nobody in this room knows about that. Here we have a communication problem again. But this is what we do. More than 6.6 billion euros spent on military equipment for Ukraine. This is also not only ammunition, this is also air defense, this is also drones, by the way. This is why the work of the new Commission on this defense white paper, mainly focusing on defense industry and investment, is so important. Because it's not enough. We need to do more. We know that. Ukraine needs, for a longer time and a longer period, they need this investment. So we need to invest in that. It's money, it's strengthening our defense industry, it's military equipment. But the problem that you address is a very important one. And that's also why we need this white paper, is that in the European Union, all the member states have always been doing this on their own. And buying wherever they wanted, whether it was the United States, whether it's South Korea, or whether it's other countries. Which means that compared to the United States have 2 types of frigates. We have 15. The United States has 1 type of tank. We have 21. In terms of operating, that is very, very difficult. And we haven't even seen the difficulties that the Ukrainians now see. Because the first reaction of the Ukrainians was, great, many thanks for all your equipment. The second reaction is, how on earth are we going to work with that? And we have examples of German-Dutch cooperation where the Germans deliver the tank and the Dutch the ammunition, and mind you, the Dutch ammunition doesn't go on a German tank. Now that is Europe of today, and that is, regardless of whoever is in the White House, that is what we as Europeans need to change. And we better start quick with that if we really want to take care of our own security.
Good point. So that is fundamentally already something on our own accord. There was a question there that I'd love to go to.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Jos van der Broek. We're organized from Brabant Campus. We're organizing the next session on this.
Oh, nice.
Europe.
Okay.
So great to be here. I was wondering on this communication. We need to better communicate, then people will understand. Is that really the case? And what is the kind of communication then that we need? Do we need to talk about anxiety? Do we need to talk about threats? Or do we need to talk about what are we striving for? What is it we want? What is it, the Europe that we're really fighting for? It's not just keeping the prosperity, but just what is the bigger goal? I was wondering whether...
I saw Nicole nodding. Is that something?
Yeah, maybe a safe example, climatic change. I'm working now, for example, in Antwerp. on a project to empower citizens to create more resilience. Of course, you need a lot of communication for that. And it's about flooding. These people have suffered a lot from flooding 3 years ago. So we thought, okay, let's empower them, give them money, give them technological solutions, communication, knowledge about the situation. Next time they are more waterproof. That was the idea. So we went to the neighborhood, we flyered, we invited a lot of people, and then hardly no one showed up while everything was in place. Money, technological solutions, everything. And then we were also wondering, as organizing team, we communicated a lot, we offered even the possibilities to do so, and hardly no one is reacting. And I was wondering, is that because 3 years ago, that's a while ago, we forgot about it, there are other top priorities now, for example, drugs criminality in that neighborhood? Is it because people think, wait a minute, I'm not going to do anything, it's a task of the government? Right. That's also possible. Or do people really don't understand what we're doing while we try to communicate it very clearly in different languages and so on? So it's more than communication. We often hear, and also we read it in international papers, more resilience for citizens and entrepreneurs. But in practice, when I look at climatic change in that context, I find it still very difficult to reach out to people and help them. And it's more than just communication. It's also a psychological barrier, I have the feeling.
Yeah, how you bring people along. That's a really good question, and you'll be there with the next session, perhaps. I mean, because it targets to the broader issue, so to say, of how do we get people along. I am super mindful of the fact that we have flown through time, everyone, and I want to ask the three of you one final question. So I will plead that you will do me the privilege of giving me a one-sentence answer, which is a very lethal.
Take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath. Focus, everyone. I need you on your best, sharpest mindset here. No, because I mean, we spoke a lot today, right? There's a very broad scope of global security threats that we're dealing with that manifest very locally, right? And that need to be locally addressed. We need to take people along on a local, very basis and perspective. If you could all share one sort of key action or key mindset shift that is needed in order to, you know, where you would believe that would make the biggest difference in preparing local communities like Limburg for the future, what would it be? And now I'm looking at who looks the most confident. Ooh, you're exuding confidence.
Not
Give
at
me
all
your
in one
sentence.
I think it's a simple message that security and defense and our welfare starts at our doorstep. I think that's a realization that we need to make.
Yeah, thank
Short
you.
sentence.
Stretch your mindsets, think the unthinkable, also consider future shocks and be prepared.
Yeah, shock boxing ourselves. Jean-Pierre?
We need a preparedness culture, and I'm thinking about John F. Kennedy. Don't only ask what the government can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Wow. Ooh, a big round of applause, everyone, for our amazing panel. I mean, there was no better note to end it on. Thank you so much. I really want to thank you for sharing all your insights, and it was a pleasure to have you here. If you want to take a seat on the sides, then we have a final short summary. So thank you so much. Once again, a big round of applause, everyone, for Jean-Pierre, Nicole, and Yves. Now, I want to thank each and every one of you for all your questions, for the interesting discussion. We're not done yet, but before we move over in a little bit into the second part of today's event, I would first like to invite Hielke Dijkstra. He's the full professor of international security and cooperation at Maastricht University. Give him a big round of applause, everyone. Because Hielke, in a little bit, will have the Prinses Beatrix lezing, the lecture. And you will give us a little bit of context, but you've also been listening into this conversation that you can share a little bit more about, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I thought this was a fascinating panel discussion, really everything that I hoped for it would be. Because as many of you know, we're going to be listening to Admiral Rob Bauer in a moment after the break. But when he got appointed to his high-level NATO job, he was really talking about societal resilience. He went to the press and he said, here in the Netherlands, here in Limburg, we need not just to talk about societal resilience, but we need to prepare as individual citizens to it. We shouldn't be just looking to the state, to the province, to the city of Maastricht. We should also, as individuals, take responsibility here. And I think this panel was a real good discussion. at the same time, I also don't need to remind all of you that the war in Ukraine next February is 3 years already going on. And in 10 weeks, we have a new president in the White House. So sometimes I feel a little bit impatient here. We are having still a discussion on how important societal resilience is here on stage, but we need to implement all of these recommendations we just got from our panel. Now, before we will invite you, I think, for a cup of coffee in the break, let me just say a few words on what we're going to have this afternoon, the Princess Beatrix Lecture. This will be the second Princess Beatrix Lecture that we're organizing. It's being organized by Studio Europa in collaboration with the province of Limburg, the city of Maastricht, and indeed the university. And we're celebrating really the long-term European support of our former queen, Queen Beatrix, for the European project. And in her name, we're allowed to have Admiral Rob Bauer here. He's going to be talking about Ukraine, he's going to be talking about NATO, and he's going to be talking about European security. So I hope that you enjoyed this first panel and that you're looking forward to his speech.
Thank you so much. A big round of applause, everyone, for Hilke Dijkstra. Now, before we go over to the break, just some general notices to make. As you can see, we have some more people joining us. So if you're deciding to stay for the Princess Beatrix lecture, I would love to ask each and every one of you to perhaps move as much to this side of the room as possible, because the new guests that will be joining us in a little bit, they'll then be able to sit here on this side and we don't have to clash. We have coffee and vlaai in the back, so make sure to get that because it's real good. I saw it. Also, I will say, this is actually important. Anybody that wants to step outside to catch some fresh air, be mindful of the fact that once you go outside, you will have to go through the check again. So bring your ID if you really need to step outside for a little bit. Make a call to your mom, get some fresh air, whatever you need to do, make sure that you take your ID with you. Otherwise, you won't be able to re-enter. With that being said, we'll start again at 4, so make sure to then be back in your seats. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in a bit again. Thanks.